Good evening, everybody. Thank you guys for pulling up the free game with the Black Community Business Advisory. My name is David Butler. I'm the Director of Community Initiatives for the Whitaker Group. We just want to take a second to thank you guys for coming out tonight. We have an amazing panel of practitioners here to help give some business advice specifically in the realm of finance to everybody. So we thank you guys for dedicating your time. I'm going to pass it off to Mr. James Whitner so he can give a little intro and a little context, and then we'll introduce our panelists and we'll get into the conversation for the night. So go take it away, Jay.
What's good, everybody? I appreciate everybody and investing their time tonight. It's exciting to continue to be able to do this and just be able to just build with everybody and do good work. So I appreciate everyone investing their time. I think this session is going to be especially fun because we all get to learn from some people that I've had the joy of working with for some time, and it's been like kind of some of the people who hide behind the curtains and deliver big gems, and it's huge gems for me along the way. I won't steal their thunder yet, but I'll just kind of let everybody introduce themselves. But this should be an impactful series, so I hope everybody's ready for it and got their questions ready and or as excited as I am. I'll pass off to the group and let everybody introduce themselves. Rigo, because I'm looking at you. Well, no, I'm messing this up. Dave, you had an order.
Yeah, you good. You're right on par. Go for it.
You want to
start?
You want to jump in, Rigo?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity. Steve Riggins, 34-year sports industry veteran. And I also moonlight as James Security, just FYI. I know you get a kick out of that. No, I look forward to the conversation. And again, I think as I said on the pre-call the other day, just here to share and be as helpful as possible.
And who wants to jump in after Rigo?
I'll pass it to Eli.
You on mute, Eli?
You're on mute, Eli.
Yeah, there you go. I was trying to unmute, but I was too slow. So thanks, Rigo. Eli Kamek for longtime finance executive, spent the bulk of my career in finance and recently transitioned a bit to the commercial side. So I'm now the global VP and general manager of the Jordan men's business. Glad to be here. Appreciate the opportunity. To James' point, it's a melding of the minds. We're here as panelists, but from my perspective, the game goes both ways. So we're just here to bond and vibe with you guys, and part of this is learning for us too. So I'll go kick it over to Chris Warren.
Hey everybody, thank y'all for having me. First of all, Chris Warren, been about 15, 16 years on the controlling accounting side, both on the public accounting side, did that about 11 years-ish, and then now spent about 6 years kind of in the retail industry. And so kind of have some experiences there that I'd love to share and have some conversation about it.
Who else we got? Who we got jumping in next?
Go for it, Brad. Oh, he muted himself. Hold on. There we go.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Hey, this is Brad Goodwin. Thanks everybody for allowing us to jump on this call. I am representing Carolyn Goodwin CPA, a small accounting firm here in Charlotte, North Carolina. We've been in business for a good 15 years or so, give or take. And in my day job, I am an underwriter for a small regional bank here in Charlotte, North Carolina as well. I've been doing that for 15 or so years. And just happy to be on board and sharing the advice that I have that comes up. Thanks a lot.
Cool. And I think we're ready to go to Les next.
So let's flip it first to Erica. Let's start with
you. Sure.
Let's start with her.
Hello, thank you. Thank you, Les. Hey guys, it's Erica Duncan, Senior Vice President at Bank of America in Community Relations. I work in the Market President's Office, have been co-leading a really unprecedented program with Les and Mark Bennett, who you'll hear from in a moment, but really leaning in on Black-owned business initiative that we're working with in the market here in Charlotte. Good to be with you guys tonight. Les, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, actually, good evening, everybody, and good afternoon to some. First of all, we are excited to be a part of this panel. Les Lambert, I'm the market exec in Charlotte. Been with the Bank of America for about 22 years and another institution about 9 years. So I guess I'm kind of old, but looking forward to having this conversation and hearing the questions. Mark, I'll flip it to you.
Man, unless you ain't old, man, you getting better, good brother.
All right, seasoned.
Yeah, season.
That's right. All those years of wisdom. So Les, thank you so much. So good afternoon, and thank you all for giving us this opportunity to really spend this evening with you as well. And I'm Mark Bennett. I am the president of Bank of America Jacksonville. I'm also the Southeast region exec for our business banking and commercial banking group. And then I have the pleasure of serving as our national exec, working on the Black and African American Business Initiative over the past 3 years as well. So really thrilled to have this ability to connect with you all and answer questions as they come up and kind of share the journey that we've been on together with Les and Erica and engaging with business owners all around the country.
And James Whitner.
And also personal security to James.
Yeah.
Man, listen, y'all gonna make somebody think that I actually need some security around here. I'm Brandis' security.
But yeah, Jay, you want to give some context, man, and then we can jump right into the conversation.
Did we get Brandis and Jeremy on the intro?
I think they're playing it back tonight.
Oh, okay. I missed that part. Okay, cool. My fault. Yeah, my fault. So everybody, I hate these intros. The goal tonight is to talk about financing and how to just drum up money for the business. I told my man Mo coming into this that I was going to pick on him, because what we have on this call tonight is some brothers and sisters that I know who are experienced in business, and some people who are looking to get in industry and get into business. And to Eli's earlier point in the conversation, and Chris's also, a lot of us just don't know what we don't know about money. Some of us know what we do know, but can't execute it, right? And some of us are still just trying to get comfortable having a conversation about it. And money's the toughest topic to speak on, right? So tonight we wanted to create a comfortable place for us all to come to talk about finance, how to get to money, how to get banks to understand what we need. I mean, I was self-proclaimed. My first conversation with Bank of America, I told them I hate them. That was a real conversation, because I really felt like that their agenda wasn't to serve us at all, and they were impossible to work with. And through my couple months, they've proved me wrong. So I give them all the credit in the world. But I'm not going to just talk about my story. I think it's only impactful if everybody on this call gets something out of it. So I want to jump in and kind of start the conversation off with Mo's question from the pre-call yesterday, because it was such an impactful question, and I was about to go on a huge, I was about to take the soapbox and go on it. Eli, I think you'll like this one. Chris, I think you'll like this one. Les, Mark, Erica, Mo, you want to jump in?
Yes, sir. Hello, everybody. My name is Mo with Studio 23 in Minneapolis. We've been here 11 years. Prior to that, I was, in 47 countries. I did marketing consulting for the airline industry, got sick of wearing a suit and tie. And I'm like, what do I love in life? And it was art, fashion, culture, music, sneakers. And that was the concept and how we started 11 years ago here in Minneapolis. Unfortunately, past year, been looted like 4 times, due to all the, things that you've all heard in the news based here in Minneapolis. But my question yesterday was, over the past 5, 6, 7 years, after the first couple of years in business, I'm sure you guys too, we're always approached by individuals, athletes, people with, with money, talking about, oh, we'd like to invest in your business, whether it's opening a new location or the location that we have. So in regards to scaling up, my question was, my thing with money, like I understand the big side of things. I've been dealing with banks my whole life, right? But on the personal investment side, like I said, individuals or organizations with money. The hard part for me is, number one, valuing the business. And number two, what is the return? So somebody wants to invest a sum of money to help you scale up, whether it's 1, 2, 3 stores or talking about franchising. What is the give back? And I've never been able to get that through my mind, because we've all built our own businesses in our respectful cities or regions. We put in all the work. Somebody comes along with a sum of money, which has its value. What is the give back? What do they get in return? Is it ownership? Is it equity? Is it a combination of things? And that's always been like a hurdle for me to get over personally, is what, you know, what do you owe them in return for the money to scale up?
So for me, Mo, in a question yesterday, I felt like this was a huge opportunity to talk about private equity.
Yep.
Because it's a term that, you know, you hear thrown around a lot, and I have my personal feelings about them, but I'm not going to lead the witness or lead the room. But I think it's a conversation that me and Les have often about private equity. But I'll let everybody else get in the conversation. I'll Chris Paul this thing around. Eli or Chris, y'all want to jump in?
I'll start. I'll kick it off, and I'll start by saying these are my opinions, right, and views. So just as a disclaimer, you know, I tell people think about the Shark Tank model, right? And what I mean by that is, you hear the guys on Shark Tank, and when they're talking about the business, they start by, you know, really trying to get at the value of the business as a function of, one, what does the business do that can't be replicated, or that, you know, sort of is distinct, and what's the value proposition, and then really going into sort of how are they generating value in terms of revenue, and based on that revenue, how profitable are they, et cetera, and really then getting to a point around what they think the value of the business is as an ongoing concern, right? And when I say as an ongoing concern, you know, people have a great product or idea, but if you're not making any money, you're not, or it's costing you too much to acquire customers, or you're not profitable. You know, a lot of times Mr. Wonderful does all the math and saying, hey, at the end, you make all this revenue, but at the end of the day, is there anything left over, right? Because the profit is what you're going to either reinvest in the business or distribute to the owners in the business. And so I'll start there. And when somebody wants to invest in your business, I tell people, always think about it through the lens of what are they doing it for, right? So because they're either investing to take it because they think your business is great and they want to fund you now, and to James's notion of private equity. So take an ownership stake or take an equity position with the view that, I'm making this up, if your business is worth $100 today and they own 10%, if it grows to be $1,000 or $100,000, that stake grows along with it. And so when somebody's looking to invest in your business, I think the conversation really goes down to, theoretically, when people are investing, they're investing for a piece of the business, which is what's termed equity. Or they might be investing to say, hey, you have a great business, but I'm looking to loan you money, which then becomes, you know, some sort of credit facility where, or some sort of debt obligation, not even credit, it's a debt obligation, where they expect you to pay them back with some sort of interest. Typically private you know, investors, if they're looking to loan you money, are going to be loaning you money at a higher interest rate, so along the lines of hard money lending. So I'll summarize it, because there are bankers here who could probably get into it a lot more depth than me, but it's really, to me, starts with understanding the individual who's trying to invest in your business's intent. Are they trying to be a partner? And partnership takes various forms. And if they're trying to do that, then they're looking for an equity position, which basically boils down to ownership. And that really then is incumbent on you to understand, how much ownership do you want to give away in your company, right? And because when they come in as owners, right, they get certain obligations come with having equity, such as voting rights, such as a piece of the profits, et cetera. So there's a long list of things we could go into unpack what having an ownership stake is. But my response to you would be really understanding what your investors' objectives are, really being comfortable with what you're willing to give up in exchange for that investment. More specifically, why you're taking on that investment. So if you're taking on somebody's money, are you using it to expand the business? Are you using it to take down your equity stake to say, hey, I've grown this business, I think it's worth X, I'm taking this down so I could liquidate or some of my holdings? They're really getting comfortable with that, but I think it primarily boils down to, what are you willing to give in exchange for that? And also being very clear in that conversation. Is it an equity position? Are they giving you a loan? What are the terms of the loan? If you default on the loan, do they take ownership of your business? At what valuation, et cetera, et cetera. So I could wax poetic on it, and I'm sure that people just is even more knowledgeable when it comes to this space. But I tell people, look at the Shark Tank model. It's a very clear frame of thinking through what's my business worth? What am I willing to give up? What are they willing to give? Because a lot of times, again, the reason why I'm using the Shark Tank example, you see owners be offered an investment and them walking away saying, no, I think you're undervaluing my business, or I don't think that really gives us full sort of credit for the value of what we deliver. So I'll stop there, Chris. Bankers, please feel free to jump in. But at the highest level, really be clear on what you think the value of your business is, how you're valuing it based on a multiple of revenue, et cetera. Understand what your comparables for your industry are, right? So if you're in the retail, you're obviously in the retail sector, what typical valuations go for. A lot of times, I'm making this up, you'll see on Shark Tank, they talk about, a typical XYZ company goes at 5x revenue multiple, right? It's a number of times the multiple of your revenues to get to a ballpark number of what it's worth. And then that really sort of determines what the valuation is and the percentage equity they would love to take, or what type of loan. I would encourage you to, when it comes to private investment, always seek out the professionals like bankers if you're going to take on debt. Just because of probably the rates might be more favorable than doing a hard money situation. But then again, that's in your purview. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, so I'm going to turn it over to our banker friends here in a minute, because I think, Eli, you summarized a lot of the points that I was going to talk about really well. I just wanted to highlight one, and again, this is kind of Chris Warren's view of the world, is this concept about what are you giving up and what do you need it for? I really think thinking about it through the lens of, if you need it for a short-term scale, then giving up long-term value might not be the best answer. So thinking about it through the lens of, if I can just get over this hump, then I can maintain my long-term value while scaling, and thinking about it through that lens. And so maybe that is an instrument in order to get that financing that would work better, so you're not having to give up that long-term value that you've got in your company, your organization. So that's one. And then second, as it relates to kind of the multiples and the valuations, I would also say, what is the differentiator, right? So Eli talked about what multiples certain businesses have, but every business is a little bit different. And if you've got a differentiator that sets you apart from your competitors, highlight that, and that could also help in terms of valuing how your organization is looked at.
And I'm gonna jump in really quick, Chris, because you hit a good point when you start talking about what we call bootstrapping, right? Where you bootstrap the business and keep equity in the business. Because for me, I'll let it out now. I wasn't a fan of private equity early on, because the idea of me giving up something and having a partner to string me along for whatever reasons just never really sat well with me. And I come from the corner, so it's one of those, like, I'd rather hustle and build the value, especially if I see the opportunity, if that makes sense. But Mo, understanding your story uniquely and going through what you've been through in the last year, with COVID and all of the unrest that's happened in and around Minneapolis, I understand that you got to start looking at all opportunities. And Chris also mentioned another good point when I think he got into debt versus equity financing. So I'm gonna step back a bit and then let Mark jump in and go in a little bit, because I'm sure I'm gonna go back and forth with Les a little bit, because I just like to do it for fun anyway. So let's see.
So let me start off by first of saying, the reason why you went into business is to run your own business, right? You're an entrepreneur, right? You work for yourself. You don't want to work for somebody else. So that's the first thing you got to realize. When you think about bringing in an investor, you're talking about giving part of the ownership up to that person. So think through that, because I've dealt with a lot of business owners, developed this great business, right? And decided to sell some portion of their business with a payout over another 5 years. So it's an earn out for the rest of the 5 years. And my question to them is, okay, are you ready to work for somebody? And you have to be ready to work for somebody, because you want to earn that rest of that payout over those 5 years. He said, yes, I'm getting a nice size of cash today, and I'm okay working for somebody. I don't have to take all the pressure on anymore. They can handle all that. I'll just work for them. I'll do my thing over the next 5 years, and I'll get the rest of the money. Several of those people never make it through those 5 years. And the simple reason, An entrepreneur comes up with some great ideas how to expand the business. And you know what? They can't implement it on their own. They have to go to a team, a board, and get their approval. Try that for 2 or 3 times, and then you realize this is not working out. So I've seen business owners leave a lot of money on the table. So my critical point is, if you're thinking about going the investment route, make sure you understand what the ultimate goal is, right? Should it be a burnout period, or should I get as much as I can and just step out? What percentage of the business you're willing to give up? Because once you do that, just be ready. It changes the game, all right? But there's good reasons to do that. You might want to take this business 5 times, right? Just know what your plan is. But I'm going to go back to something that somebody else said. Don't wait for somebody to come up to you with the number. Make sure you do your due diligence well in advance and know what that number should be, because you don't want to end up losing a lot up front.
And I think earlier on, somebody popped in the chat already. Something that's very important. And while we got you talking, let's talk about the difference between debt financing and equity financing, because we're talking about it. We kind of beating around the bush, right? Debt financing is. Go ahead, Les. Let me let you.
I was waiting to hear you say it, man. Let me hear you present it. Come on, you've been hanging around.
Oh man, because you know I'm gonna start talking about. I talk about private equity. I talk about private equity people like they're the scum of the earth. Like, because it's tough for me as an entrepreneur. Like, yo, as an entrepreneur, we built these dreams. And to Les's point, like to be good at what we do, you have to be a visionary. You have to be able to dream these crazy things up. And there's nothing more restricting than having your good idea quantified and somebody tell you can't do it because you're not going to make enough money in year 1. I might jump after the second time somebody told me that, if that makes sense. But to his point, and someone else brought it early in the conversation, if you start talking about private equity as a strategic partner versus just an equity partner, it gets interesting, right? Like, example, we do I'm year living. Say if we got hit up by the Satai and they want to get into our segment of the business and they want to get into boutique hoteling and they want to get into the experience lane, it could be an opportunity to partner with them, and you could create a strategic partnership with the Satai, and they may bring in capital and wherewithal in hospitality, where we bring culture and cool in the connection to consumer, and that might be a match made well, because we have a strategic vision to push something, which is very different than the idea of somebody coming into a thing that's yours and then they just want to come into it for money per se, and they start trying to drain the business of capital and pushing debt on the business. I went a little further than what I wanted to, but let's hopefully you can pick up from there, because there's some questions. There's some questions in about strategic partnership and equity, and Eli and Chris, feel free to jump in when y'all want. Same thing, Mark.
Yeah, so Mark and Erica, jump in anytime you want to. But I want to go back to that point that somebody mentioned about franchising, right? So let's say you have a concept and you have 10 or 15 stores today, and that's your own baby, right? You own that 100%. But now you want to franchise that, right? You want to build out the platform and do that. That could be something you bring in an equity partner for. So you have 2 separate businesses, right? They can earn a percentage of the revenue on the franchising piece, provide the equity to go out and build that out, get the legal work in place, get the structure in place, get the organization in place, so you can then take it to multiple states or even overseas. That's one way of doing it. That's different from debt financing. Think about it, because you're saying to them, I'm willing to put in 60% of my money in this, and the equity partner is willing to put in 40%. And they're going to get that 40% return. And I want to make sure we stay around that 51% that you have controlling interest, because if you lose that, then they have controlling interest. But that's where you can actually take an idea, a concept from the beginning, build it out with the team, and really roll it out nationally very quickly. be kind of hard to do with bank financing. So that's the difference, right? But on the other side, on your
Well,
primary
why is it hard to do with bank financing though? Because everybody, the question everybody says, what's the purpose of a bank if you ain't lending no money?
So you got to balance the risk and reward, right? So the bank is lending it based on an interest rate they're going to make, right? And the interest rate typically should not be usurious. So what we only can do is we can say we're going to do this based on a LIBOR rate or a prime rate, right? And we're going to be willing to take certain risks based on the collateral we have. When you look at situations where we can't look at cash flow to support the debt, and the franchise is a perfect example, right? This is a startup, a concept. Then we really have to figure out, okay, what's the risk and reward? And for a typical banking financing, that won't be something we can look at because we have to look at historical cash flow in order to make the deal work. We have to show the ability to pay the debt back over a period of time. On this side, with this concept on the franchise, you're saying if everything goes as well as I expected, this is what the return will be over a period of time. Are you, the investor, if you find a bank, are you willing to help invest in this deal and ride with us through this long period of time? And by the way, the return is much greater on the investment side.
Can I give an example, guys, that might help? I mean, I think you summed it up perfectly, both of you. I have a friend who quit his corporate 9-to-5 consultant, super sharp, he was one of the early people, it's legal, so I can talk about it, in medical cannabis, has a couple licenses out in Cali. And he's been doing it for a while, but early days, he couldn't get funding from banks because of the nature of the business and whatever, even though he's a grower, legit, everything above board. And so the private equity boys came in, big business came in and offered him to a large 7-figure investment for equity. And he gave them close to 40% of equity in the company. Fast forward 5 years, he was called me having a conversation because he wants to buy them out now but given equity, he gave 40% ownership in his company and all his licenses and his grow, whatever, to get the liquidity to expand the business. Fast forward today, the business is worth north of 100 million. They own over 40% of it for what they put in at the time, which was, I think, ballpark 2 million. Now they own over 40 million. He has to buy them out because they own a significant piece. They get a say in everything he's doing. They've over corporatized it, limited his expansion, et cetera. If he had been able to go borrow money, right, take on debt, take a loan from a butter for that same 2 million and have a note that he paid over 30 something years, he still would own 100% of his company. So he still would own close to 100 million. And he would be paying whatever his monthly or whatever the fixed, payment plus interest is on that. So the fundamental difference for many of you who are startups is, equity, you're taking money to give somebody ownership of your idea, your baby, your intellectual property, and that ownership grows as you grow. Yes, you don't have to pay them back a payment and have to pay, interest on the loan, or the ability to go take a fixed chunk of money with a fixed interest rate and have all the obligations that go with paying the loan down, similar to any payment you would have. It's a real life example of an entrepreneur who's over 6 months grown this big thing. And now he's sitting here saying, they're a part owner. I got to buy them out. I got to buy them out at a premium. Okay.
Right. And building off that, right, you could look and say, what would the interest rate have to have been if you were able to get debt financing at that point in time for what it's going to cost to then buy those folks out? And in all likelihood, it would have been a number that you probably couldn't have even imagined, right? But I think the challenge becomes, at that point in time, who is willing to take that leap of faith that business is going to grow into a $100 million business so that you can get financing that they're willing to take on that risk, that it's going to work out that way. And that becomes a challenge at the beginning.
Chris and Eli, we both know that's a key point, and y'all was setting it up to be said too. That's the conundrum. That's the setup, right? Because someone asked a question in the chat. How do you get financing when you start up? With Les, Erica, and Mark here, I can say clearly, how do you? Because my answer is going to be, let me lead the witness. You don't. You rob Peter to pay Paul. You max credit cards. You scrounge. You get as much as you can. Yeah. You do everything you can to hustle and put your. That's why they call it bootstrapping. You got to be really strategic early on because it's in those first 2 years, the rates of failure are so high, primarily because of lack of capital. That's one of the main reasons why most small businesses fail, because they're not capitalized in the beginning. I'll let you jump in and wave that magic wand of 24-month capital you about to wave on us right now. Sprinkle that dust. Give us that dust.
So, James, you summed it up nicely. That is the biggest challenge. And I think banks are looking at it today to figure out how we can do a better job. But going back to that whole investment concept, the investment could be family and friends that invest in your business at the beginning to get the stats. I think it's about 40 to 50% of businesses fail in the first 2 years. So that's what banks hear, and that's what banks think about. So they're trying to figure out ways how we could do a better job of helping those businesses out, right? Because again, if you're talking about a startup, there's no history. There's an idea. It's probably a really good idea. The question is, how do you get it past that first year or second year? And the challenge we have as a bank is quantifying that.
So what I'm going to jump in and say real quick is, Les, I think, and you stop me if I'm oversharing, because I'm gonna share a little bit. You can smack my hand or not. But I think you guys are starting to have some new ideas around private equity. And to Eli's earlier point, right? When you start talking about private equity who comes in, and that's the private equity that I hate, because I don't hate strategic private equity. It's incredible, like incredible. To get strategic partnerships done is the best thing in the world, because it's a win-win for you and the partner if the opportunity creates synergy, right? But there's opportunities for the private equity business to change and guys to not look to make 40,000% on a return. Like, I don't know quick math, but if Eli's homeboy sold a part of his company for 2 million and is trying to buy out the buyout on that is 40 or 50 million, like, come on, man. Like, you ate so good. And the turn time on that return was what? 3-4 years, you said?
Yeah.
Like, that's the private equity. I get it. I get capitalism. I understand. So me and Les have spent a lot of time talking about how do you start to change the private equity model so there's opportunities for investors and entrepreneurs to have a fair relationship. And the buyout is a little more fair than market pricing, especially when you hit that home run. Now, don't get me wrong. Are you taking some of the wind away from the entrepreneur? Yeah. And they have to, away from the investor. Yeah. They have to know that going in, but it has to be about us creating an ecosystem and building a community so we can all win. You could go in a little bit if you want.
And I'll start. And James, thanks for teeing up. And I know Mark can jump in as well. So first of all, James, we've been spending too much time together. That's the first thing I'll say. Because you probably can tell this whole story as well as I can. So the first thing I would tell you, and I tell James this all the time, and tell this to other people, if we can't figure this out now, given what we've been through this year and last year, we got a big problem. A lot of people are taking notice of what organizations are doing to really help out the Black and brown community. So again, if we can't figure it out now, then we're done. We're dead in the water. There's no hope for us anywhere down the road. That's the way I look at it. So what Bank of America is doing, and there's other organizations as well, other banks and other large corporations, is trying to figure out what other steps we can take to really help Black and brown business owners. So what James is talking about is, so you have your traditional investors out there that are looking to do find businesses to invest in. What we're trying to do is to say, okay, and there's a couple that we're working with right now that they're saying, look, I want to help Black and brown businesses. And by the way, I want to make money, our plan, right? We want to help Black and brown businesses out. So give them investment and then have a set repayment plan, right? After 3 or 5 years, you'll know what the potential payout could be. It won't be 100%, it'll be 20%, but set at the beginning. So you know right now, as I believe, Mark, correct me on that, I think it's $300 million that we're investing in minority funds to invest in Black and brown businesses. And of course, there's some stipulations in there, right? We don't want them to go crazy on the returns, but we specifically want them to invest in this. So Bank of America has this commitment out there for 1.25 million. And from that is this 300 million we're investing in these different funds throughout the US. Again, another vehicle to help Black and brown businesses take off. Another thing we're doing is, and it's work in progress. It's not fixed yet. I'll tell you what, a lot of this is just coming out of the ground. But we're investing our CDFIs and MDIs. MDIs is minority deposit institutions. CDFI are community reinvestment.
Community development funds.
To institutions.
It's community. Thank you. Development funds. Yes, thank you. So what we're doing is working with them because we believe that they have a little bit more flexibility than banks to help Black and brown business owners. So we have funded a lot of these CDFIs and MDIs. We put money in their organizations to lend to Black and brown businesses at a more favorable rates and more favorable structures. Now we're going through this process right now, right? We're watching them. We're seeing how they're doing it with the funds, and we're keeping track of it because we want to see the ones that really are helping out and the ones that are really not doing too much. So all this is taking place right now. I'm gonna stop there.
Let me I'm gonna jump in for a second and just shift gears because we've been going for so long, and I want to make sure I get you off the phone before 10 o'clock tonight, and get into the chat because the chat's been on fire the whole time we've been talking. Dave, you got some good ones you pulled out of the chat. I'm going through. There's so many. I think you probably got your eyes on it. Any good voices we need to pull into the conversation?
Yeah, I got two. I'm gonna go Channing, and then I'm gonna go to Giovanni after that. I think they got. I know we jumped into deep water and went straight into kind of equity finances versus debt financing, but I think for kind of our folks who may have like younger businesses or newer businesses or just getting into finance, maybe thinking about business credit and things like that, I think these questions will be super relevant. So we'll start with those and we can build back into the other portions of the conversation.
And if anyone has any other questions, please drop them all in the chat so we can make sure we got eyes on all the questions as they're coming in. Because a lot was just said. And if you don't know what we're talking about either, drop that in too. Like, what are you talking about? What is this? Knowing what you don't know is helpful too, right? Go ahead, Chan, my fault.
No, you're good. I was just wondering if we could discuss business credit just a little bit. By the way, I'm Channing. I'm in Dallas, Texas. I run a women's website called cnkdaily.com as well as Shop CNK Daily. We are a platform designed to serve women in the sneaker and streetwear space, and now we're looking to elevate into a retail space, hopefully within the next year. So I'm just wondering if we can kind of discuss business credit a little bit, just the ins and outs of like when applying for business credit, like what's an acceptable interest rate, what's considered predatory, that type of stuff.
I think that's B of A, folks.
Mark, you want to start?
Chan want that. Y'all said y'all got that 1.2% startup rate, right? No credit, no docs.
0.9. What you talking about? 0.99.
We need some of that. Could you drop that? Could you drop that in the chat, man? Matter of fact, I'm gonna throw my Cash App in the chat too, so Bank of America can hit that too. While you
actually, I think I did. I think I did hear Brad said he has those kind of rates. Brad, you still on there?
No mas on mine.
So let me answer that question. By the way, congratulations on your business and your expansion plans. So, when you think about interest rates, you're either going to be dealing with prime base or what we used to call LIBOR, and now it's BSBY because of what's going on in Europe. So 2%, 3%, 4% over BSBY. And I can't remember what BSBY stands for.
What's BSBY or what's LIBOR? What's the LIBOR rate? How do people check the LIBOR rate or the BSBY rate? Because that term might get someone.
Yeah, so let's stick with Prime because you can find Prime. Prime is the standard vehicle that we use, and it's typically like 3.25, and you can find that in the newspaper. You actually can Google it and find it as well.
So
And
y'all
the
chart,
spread over that.
it is prime minus, right?
No, it's gonna be Prime plus at least one or greater. But again, it's based on the credit strength of the business, the financial performance. That rate could be either low or high. I've seen somewhere it's at Prime.
Talk about what financial strength is and business credit a little bit.
Okay, all right. So the financial strength is really around cash flow. So we talked about EBITDA. So I'm gonna go back and forth here. So I apologize.
Say what EBITDA means. Interest. Some of us know interest before. There's some
Earnings. Yeah. Earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Amortization, correct. All right. So when we talked about the investors, right, they're looking at EBITDA, right? They're looking at a return on their investment. Banks are also looking at EBITDA as well, because that's what's going to help pay back our debt. So the stronger your EBITDA is, the better your overall opportunity to be successful. And as a result, your rate is probably going to be the most attractive. So when you think about it, you think about finance, we look at EBITDA, right? But if you're talking about working capital needs, and when I say working capital, if you're talking about receivable and inventory financing, that's a working capital need. And that's going to be supported by a line of credit. If you're talking about
stop, because we got to freeze that part, because you got retailers on the phone who need that, right? So we got to come back to that. We got to make sure we come back to that working line of credit to help support cash flow. That's an important piece. But I'm gonna throw it in the chat so we come back to it. But go for it. Keep going.
So let's keep in mind, because if you think about it, you're getting terms from your vendors, right? So they either give you 30 or 60 days on the inventory. So you got to make sure you can leverage that with your customer base. The second option is, and so this is a different type of financing you should be thinking about, is I'm planning to do an expansion. I'm planning to open up stores. Well, guess what? That's not a working capital line of credit. That's more of a permanent loan, permanent working capital. So that's typically going to be either 3 years, 5 years, 7, depending on the collateral. And I'll have monthly principal and interest payments on that, because you're not going to pay it back immediately, right? It's not going to be through the conversion of assets. It's not going to be by credit card payments from your customers, receivables if you have it, or a conversion of the inventory. That is related specifically for working capital, and that's the line of credit. Expansion plans, that's where you think about a term loan. The more you could be prepared for the questions you're hearing, you're going to expect to hear from the business, the bank, the better you are with getting the deal done. That's the most favorable for you.
Let me pause you so we can get Brad in the book. Brad,
James, could I just jump in real quick with one thing? I think people should click back a bit to just, and I'm not a banker, but I've spent a lot of time as a CFO. I think for a lot of you, the nugget that comes out of this is there's a lot, information is power. Where I'm going is, he gave you a lot of different terms that it starts with knowing what you're trying to accomplish. If you're financing receivables, you know it's more short-term. It's about, using it as working capital cash flow. Understand the terms around the type of loan or the type of financing you need. Something that's more long-term, that's going to be a fixed payment, you're going to spread out of a longer term. Understand the terms around it, because things such as prime rate, such as overall interest rates, such as the average interest rate for a business with a credit rating similar to your company, are all things you could Google literally and find out. And so you're not starting off from a place of not having knowledge. You could actually arm yourself with a lot of stuff that's in the public domain and go into that meeting very well versed, because I'm making this up. Let me take myself as a person. If I needed to take a loan, finance a car, credit card, do whatever, I should know based on my credit rating of X, I should be paying this, right? Because it's out there. I could Google average, whatever your credit rating is, 700, 750, 800. And so anything above and beyond that range, you should be able to say, nope, I need to go shop around or whatever. So I'm starting with, he's giving you a lot of nuggets, but start with, how do I arm myself with understanding my objectives, right? Because you shouldn't be taking a long-term loan in order to finance, working capital, et cetera. And then what are the types of rates and what ballpark are the types of rates or terms I should be I'm expecting when I go in to have those discussions? And then furthermore, what type of information should I be prepared to furnish when I go into those discussions?
So
Yeah,
Brad, hold on, Les, for 1 second.
okay.
I'm going to go to Brad. I'm going to ask you a question. Good question just came in the chat, Brad. What's the
Okay.
typical EBITDA required to cover a loan? How could we take our EBITDA and estimate what size loan we may be eligible to receive?
That's a good one. Actually, your B of A guys might be better equipped to answer that. I think I'll defer to Mark or Les on that one because my approach may not be as orthodox as these guys.
Well,
I think
give us
Yeah, Brad, tell us. I'm curious.
Give us the unorthodox.
So what typical EBITDA required to cover a loan? It depends on the loan size, I guess I would say. And when I say that, they're talking about you would talk about how much we as bankers want to leverage, extend dollars based on EBITDA, and maybe that's 2 times, 3 times, or whatever. And so if your EBITDA is, call it $100,000 EBITDA, do you want to land 200,000 or 300,000 on that EBITDA, right? And it kind of depends on how consistent that cash flow is. Is it recurring every year, or is it cyclical? Maybe some years you don't make 100,000. Maybe some years you knock it out of the park. Well, I would probably take an average of that to come up with how much I'm willing to lend against your average cash flow, and that's what I would do. But again, maybe Bank of America would have a better approach than that.
Can I say something about the second part of that question about how big you could go? I think part of this, like Eli was talking about, is coming in with the knowledge. I think you got to come in with what do you need rather than what they're willing to give you, right? So a little bit of it is what do I need? Because based on that will then say, okay, these are the specifics as to what I'm going to the bank for, short-term, long-term expansion, et cetera. And then that probably is part of the conversation rather than, hey, this is my EBITDA, how much are you willing to give me, is a little bit of a different conversation that may not have the necessary information as you're going to that bank. Just
So
yeah.
I'm a pivot back because I'm gonna switch it to just keep the conversation going. Let's talk about personal guarantees because that's one we hear a lot about. It says, can anyone speak to personal guarantees?
All right, let me just give you another ballpark number. I would say 1.5 coverage for the debt service based on EBITDA. Okay.
What does
That-
define out a little more?
1.5, the debt service coverage. So when you think about what kind of coverage we're looking for, it's about that 1.5. We want to make sure you can support that debt at that level. So you got to have 150% EBITDA to support the dollar amount that you're looking for. Okay. And then going back to the guarantees, if you think about most banks look at guarantees pretty much the same, right? Depending on the business, depending on how strong the cash flow is, depending on how strong the collateral is, they might be willing, in the history of the business, to not have 100% guarantees. They might be willing to do 50% guarantees, and in some cases, no guarantees. So you have a company that's been established for 20 plus years, historically very strong cash flow, strong collateral. There's a possibility there won't be any guarantees to that. Now, if it's a $3 to $5 million revenue company, when we look at these companies, we typically say it's one and the same with the owner, right? As the revenue comes in, it typically is distributed out to the owners. So typically we look at the company and the owners as one and the same. So you can't separate out the business from the guarantors in that case. So that's how I look at it. But I want to go back to one other point, and James, I apologize. So when you think about working capital, you're going to have a floating rate on that. But where I see businesses get into trouble when they do these expansion loans or term loans, they attach a floating rate to that. And that could potentially be a problem in rising rate environments. So if you think about where we are today, we're at the bottom of rates today, right? It only can go up. If it goes down, we got a bigger issue. But rates will only go up. So if you lock in, if you do a permanent capital expansion, let's say you do it for $1 million, $2 million over 5 to 7 years, and you're at a floating rate today, it's going to look really good now. But in a year to 2 years down the road, the rate's going to start climbing and your debt service will continue to climb as well. So you got to think about all the different factors that can impact you, not just today, but down the road.
Dave, you want to get another question in? We clicking towards 8 o'clock and we're going to probably go to about 8:30. So I want to make sure we get as many questions in as possible in the process.
Yep, I'm gonna go to Giovanni. He was next on my list, and then I'll come up with some more here after he's done.
Dave got a really good question about how much is too much debt, which I think is a very good question. Giovanni, what's good with you, homie?
What's going on, B-Dog? How you doing?
I ain't making no noise.
Yes, sir. So my name is Giovanni. I'm the owner of Fitted CLT here in Charlotte, and my main issue has been acquiring capital. I'm a new business, and all I've been hearing is you need to be in business 2 years or more. We're doing really good. I just need some more, capital to stay in my business. Excuse me. So that was really my question.
So that is the answer you're going to hear, is you typically have to have 2 years of financials in order to get working capital. That's why we're trying to leverage like some of the CDFIs and some of the MDIs to say, okay, he has 1 year of numbers. Again, what they're looking at is cash flow, right? They want to show the ability of you to support the debt you're requesting. So typically it's 2 to 3 years. We want to see historical numbers, but with some CDFIs, they're willing to look at 1 year and then look at a forecast.
What does CDFI mean? Just so he's aware.
Community Development Financial Institution. And in Charlotte, we have several. LISC, LISC is one that's in Charlotte. It's a national one as well. There's several of them in Charlotte. And if you want to, James can connect you up with me and I can connect you up with one of those CDFIs, but they're not just in Charlotte, they're national. We can connect you up with different ones. But again, it's just getting you in the door at the initial step. And then as you continue to grow, then we can look at your traditional bank financing.
And Giovanni, there's something else too, just from entrepreneur to entrepreneur. You got to think about all the unconventional ways, credit cards, friends, you know, because the idea for your business is figuring out how to cash flow your business, right? If you selling, the business is hats, right?
Right.
So if you, how many hats a month are you selling? What's your burn off? How much profit is you making on those hats, right?
Right.
What's your monthly expenses?
Right.
Are you covering your monthly expenses by the hats you selling, right? If you covering, what's your opportunity to sell more hats, right? So if you're having an issue where you're not, where you don't have enough hats and you could sell more, that's an easier problem to solve than just I need money. Does that make sense? That's it. You forming your question wrong. You get the question. What you need to be saying is, hey, we got all these customers who want our product and we need more product. Somebody who's going to respond to that inquiry a little different than, hey, we're a startup and we need money. Does that make sense?
For sure.
And some of it is just like, and as we go through this series, we're going to hit different parts of the grind and different parts of the hustle and in the journey. So make sure you stick around, because especially if you have a business that's doing really well in the first 2 years and you burn it, I mean, you killing it, right? There's a different way to solve for that. Does that make sense?
For sure. 100%. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Oh, no doubt.
Yes, sir.
But James, you brought up a really good point. The credit card could be the starting point for the business to help with the working capital, right? And as they continue to grow, the card can continue to increase to the point where it can then eventually become a working capital line of credit. I will always caution people about American Express. because then you have to make those payments, those full payments, or otherwise the interest rate is really kind of challenging going forward.
But
Right.
the only thing I'll say about Amex though, they move a little different than some of the other banks, and I could testify that, like, yo, Amex was my first line of credit for the first 5-6 years. We had nothing. Then one of my homies from the foundation was like, bro, get an Amex, and got an Amex, and it went from 1 to 2 to 3 very quickly if you're paying it down. But Les is right. You got to make the payment by the end of the month, but it's a lot easier to get the room, but you can hang yourself if you can't make that payment in 30 days, right?
Yeah, that cycle time is critical.
Yes.
Right.
And when you take a credit card, learn the cycle. Like, understand when those cycles hits, because, you know, as a hustler, you're trying to get as much inventory turned by the end of the cycle. You got to understand those cycle times, and don't pay the last day of the cycle. Pay 5 days ahead of the cycle, so you can't you'll end up in a bad spot.
Sure.
And James, let me add one other thing. Let me add one other thing on that, because you're talking about the cycle time, and I want to make sure people understand this. With these credit cards, you could, if you can convert your inventory very quickly, you can increase your card side by just reducing the cycle time. Instead of paying in 30 days, you pay it in 15 days, and you actually double your card spend. So if you have 50,000 and you go from a 30-day to a 15 day, you actually are moving it up to $100,000 worth of spend. But again, it's a cycle time, and you're turning the card very quickly.
Eli, you about to say something.
Hey, James.
And somebody else is saying, hey, James, I don't know.
It's Mark. And I just wanted to make sure I jumped in, just because there's one topic I think we just haven't covered, since we're talking about funding the startup and then those first couple of years. One of the other kind of hidden secrets that's out there, and given that so many business owners are creating jobs and you're creating career paths in so many different neighborhoods, you also want to take in consideration the grant process. And I think there's a lot of local grants, federal grants, as well as companies provide different grants that business owners can actually apply for. That could be great seed money to be able to get that business jump started within the first few years as well, and get you to that point where you've now got that solid foundation of 2 or 3 years of financial statements. You can come and present that to the bank and figure out exactly how we continue to help with a working capital solution. But some of the underutilized funding sources is usually that grant process and working through incubators, your local chambers. So there's a lot of different partners in that local community that you could potentially engage with, which is not going to take an equity share. It's going to truly be a grant that's going to help you seed your business because you're doing great work in that local community.
20-second TV timeout, everybody.
Sure.
One thing that we got to make sure that this is important, right? Because we're talking all this grant, and B of A's on, and I'm putting you on the spot right now. Y'all talking all this Black $1 billion talk. We got to make sure y'all drop in the chat, or we'll make sure we assemble a way that if anyone's interested in gaining more information on grants, gaining more information on any of the people from the panel that's making themselves available for further conversation, we'll figure out a way to make sure that information is exchanged, so there can be follow-ups and ways for you guys to continue the conversation and connect to some of these opportunities, if that makes sense. Eli, you were going before Mark jumped in. Mark, very good point on grants.
I just have a quick point, guys. They're giving you a lot of nuggets around, how to get after financing, things to think about. But there were a couple jewels that were dropped in there that I think you should always make sure. We talked about inventory turns. People talked about, to me, running a business comes down to really knowing your business, because to get to a point where your inventory is turning, or you're moving your product enough, you need to know your product. What products are you carrying? What's your Monday to Friday product? That doors open, lights on, right? You have the tails. Everybody wants the fresh, the high-end. James Stewart, he sells a lot of stuff, Margiela, blah, blah, blah. But I bet you he knows the price points at the lower end that keep the traffic going, that no matter what, enable him to pay his business, pay his bills. So getting access to capital is great and is a hurdle, but knowing your business and understanding the dynamics of your business and how you're sorting your business, how you're driving traffic that enables you to keep your business sustained, even in tough times, is just as critical as having the access to capital. And we can connect you with all the resources, but it comes, and we do it even in big businesses. I mean, everybody does it, understanding the core of your business that is going to sustain your business and making sure you are assorting or putting the right things in place. So a young gentleman talked about having a hat company. yeah, you know, you're going to have all kinds of hats, but probably a Yankees fitted or whatever city you're in, those fitted. What are those lines that are going to keep that turn going, that are going to move it? So something to think about as well. Knowing and understanding your business dynamics very well is what's going to enable you to drive that efficiency in your inventory turns and making and moving the product to be able to pay those bills and get bigger.
Giovanni, I'm gonna give you a simple equation that I live by. This is day one. This is 2005 shit I'm about to give you right here. You want to know how I knew if I was gonna stay alive every month? You take what it costs for you to do business, right? You know, your rent, everybody, your lights, your gas, everything you got, add it up. Know that like the back of your hand. Sleep with it, right?
Right.
Divide your margin, right? What does it cost? You buying a hat for $1? You selling it for $3? Is you selling it for $2? Divide your margin by it. That's going to tell you how much you need to do business. Don't you miss that fucking number.
Right.
You miss that number too many months, you're dead.
Right.
Right?
For sure.
If you can double that number, call Les. If you could triple that number, Les is going to be calling you. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I've been doing good. I've been doing great. Financially, I've been doing extremely well. I just need more. I want to grow it a little more. So,
yeah,
but we've been doing pretty good.
But the key is what Eli said. You got to focus on the turns. You got to focus on assortments. And as we get through the six, I don't want to say episodes. That just sounds so TV. As we
Sessions.
Get 6 sessions. As we get through the 6 sessions, we're gonna come with a lot of different parts of business. And Eli kind of went deep on one that's so important about the business. And I can go on a soapbox, but I don't want to. I want to stick to finance. But he is spot on, bro. Spot on.
Right. For sure. I appreciate everything. Thank you.
Yeah, no doubt. Dave, where we going?
We go to Kenneth Woodley next. Still in the same realm of kind of that business finance, getting yourself together to get that those initial grants and things like that.
And if once again, we're saying a lot as we wait for the next person to jump in with the question. We're saying a lot. If you don't know what we're talking about at any time, say I have no clue what this is. Please drop that in so we can go more in depth, so we're not talking over anybody's head. The whole goal is for us to be here and to come in with nothing and learn. And if you've been in business for 15 years and there's something you're looking to get out of this conversation, do not sit in the background and not ask the question. We're not helping each other if it's not getting out there. Jump in the comments. We in the comments looking for questions.
Kenneth, you there?
Yeah, I'm here with you, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Go for it.
Yeah. So basically, what I'm trying to do, of course, like everybody else, is trying to get myself off the ground. So just asking questions, trying to get the right information I need in order to move forward. It's been a situation where, like, you never feel like you're getting the actual answers from the right people. So, and I was talking about, like, me being a veteran, me starting my business, which is the Kick clothing line, the Kick apparel. You're dealing with a lot of information as far as the small business side. I've filled out tons and tons of applications, tons and tons of loans and all kind of other stuff, and trying to figure out where I'm gonna go. So my question would be, what would be the best way to handle it? What would be the best way to overcome all of that and finally get the resources that you need to move forward?
Did you get specifically into the details?
Okay, I can get the details of that.
And for this here, I'll give you a better one.
Okay.
Dave is about to drop a survey into the chat. If you make sure you copy the link, grab it, or hit the link and open it up on whatever device you want so you can fill the survey out. The survey is going to allow us to get all of your information, email, just fill the survey out. And we'll make sure we get it to all the panelists, and everybody here who's able to help you will reach out to you to make sure that we can help. Does that make sense? Because what I don't want to do, Kenneth, is I don't want to go too deep. What city you in?
I'm in South Carolina, Columbia.
That's your neck of the woods, right?
We can have somebody call them. That's not going to be any problem.
Brad, I ain't throwing you under the bus here, but I know you showing up in a couple couple different capacities. This is our neck of the woods.
Yes,
You
sir.
cro-
Actually, to Kenneth, I'm actually from Orangeburg, so I know exactly where you're at.
All right, man. Hey, we're gonna have to link up, definitely.
Definitely.
So for Kenneth, my opportunity for you, I would love for you to jump in and fill the survey out,
Okay.
and let one of us follow up with you and go deep, because we got 15 minutes left. And if we go too deep, then we won't get through some of the broad questions on financing. But we want to make sure that we're able to get you the conversation and the mentorship that you need to move forward, bro.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it.
Always love.
There's a really good comment in here from the Starlings talking about kind of targeted at the bankers, asking about stress the importance of having a good accountant or working with a good accounting firm. So I definitely think we should definitely touch on that one before we get up out of here.
Get that. That's a good one.
And it doesn't always have to be a very large firm either. But I'll tell you where I've seen some issues is where a company first 2 or 3 years has this beautiful firm that they've been working with from inception. And now 10 years, 15 years later, they still are with that same firm, right? You got to be really careful about that, because you got to make sure as you are growing, your firm is growing, right? And they have the resources to support you in that growth. So we have seen some disconnects there on the quality of the financials and the quality of the support. So you really do need to think about that.
That's a good one, Les, because I'm guilty of that. Or I was guilty of that before I made a change. Is someone pulling in to ask a question, or we going in on it?
Hey, James, and also when you think about it, when you start with your business, you tend to be the jack of all trades, right? And as your business continue to grow, you want to continue to be the jack of all trades, and that never works. So you need to start thinking about your leadership team, your management team, and investing in that group, because trust me, it'll pay dividends in the long run.
But also I'm going to push back and say you got to know how long you got to juggle those balls, because I'll be the first person to tell you it's a delicate balancing act to add the right people in. And I'll be the first person to tell you we run a 5-guard offense. If you can't shoot, drive, and get to the hoop on our if you can't shoot, pass, and get to the hoop on our team, you don't play, right? Because we got to still be able to be nimble. Because the second that payroll starts to bloat, because you want to hire specialized shooters. If you in a shooter business, cool. But for us, you got to be versed in a lot of things, because we got to be nimble, and you got to have ambitions, and you got to have ambition and drive. And sometimes those are things that you can't outsource, right? It comes with trial and error, and having people that been in the mud with you, who got a passion for the business the same way you do. So you gotta be very careful in building a leadership team. Leadership teams ain't got nothing to do with homeboys and homegirls. It has everything to do with people who really want to go to work for the right reasons.
No, I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. But I'll tell you right now, there's also the right time to bring a Shaq on board.
Yeah, you can bring Shaq on board anytime. Shaq. You come on.
Not as a point guard. Not as a point guard.
How you gonna throw Shaq in the mix? Shaq is a chip winner, man.
Not as a point guard or a free throw shooter. Come on, man.
Yeah, man, listen. Here go, man. I ain't gonna even see you starting, man. We went this whole hour and a half.
Now, so Carla put in accountant, bookkeeper, payroll company. Can we talk to some folks about the difference between an accountant and a bookkeeper, just as a one-on-one type of a situation? I think that's a good kind of fundamental.
Go ahead, Brad.
Man, you really put me out over my skis on this one. So my wife.
No. I know your wife. Go ahead, Eli. Go ahead, Chris.
So, but I'll take a shot at it, right? So I'll answer that question to the best that I can, right? So a bookkeeper is someone that's going to put the numbers in as they come in. You know, cash is cash, AR is AR. But when you get into the accounting, you're talking about accruals and all types of other type of treatments of income, whether it's deferred income or restricted income or things of that nature. They're more, and in some regards, they may go to the extent of providing advice on how you should make decisions on as your cash comes in or as you're paying your bills, i.e. your accounts payables. And from what I've seen with bookkeepers that we've used in the past, speaking of saying with my wife, she's used bookkeepers, you know, those numbers, the bookkeepers put those numbers in the financial system, and she comes back and reclassifies them as they need to be. And that's as far as I'm going to go before I really misspeak.
I'm gonna let Chris. Let me say something. I'm gonna say something funny before you and Eli go, and don't take it the wrong way, nobody. I got bankers on the line. And I don't want to get smacked, but I'm gonna say it anyway. If you ain't making no money, you ain't got nothing to count, right? So the first thing you need to do is make sure, like, because so many people sometimes focus on, especially in the beginning, you focusing on hiring all these professionals. In the beginning, the first thing you need to focus on is what Giovanni's talking about, and what Eli was talking about, turning out product, understanding what your niche is in the market. Once you get to a point where the money's starting to come in just a little faster, that you got to take out an hour in your time or some time to start counting it, that's when it's bookkeeper time. If the money's not coming in so fast that if you can count the money when it's coming in by hour, I will focus on making more money. If it's coming, when it start coming in a little faster than you can count, or if it take you at the end of the day when you got to stop and take a couple hours to count, then it's bookkeeper time. I just wanted to make sure I threw that in there so everybody don't go spend the first half of their time looking for professionals. Although it's very important, you got to have a driver, you got to have a business model, you got to have a business before you start keeping.
Yeah. So
Before,
maybe
my bad, Chris. 1 second, because Erica just dropped off on us, and she said just regarding the question about grants, because that's kind of her world. She said regarding grants, make sure you pay attention to the requirements. Bank of America requires a 501c3, so those types of certifications and things like that. She's happy to talk more, so make sure you fill out the survey. We'll get you in contact if you have questions about grants, nonprofit, et cetera. We can get you in contact with
Man, Les, how you gonna not throw the rock to Erica at all, man? You hogged the whole Bank of America ball, man. That's why they. Yeah, man. I would have dropped off the call if I was her too.
I was just going to come back to the bookkeeper accountant conversation just for a minute and try to summarize it real quick by saying a bookkeeper is internal, trying to get you right, to make sure that you know, to James's point, how much money did you make? Because if it took an hour out of my day to count it, they're going to help you put that all together. An accountant, to bring it back to this finance conversation, might be someone who you've hired to certify that you actually made that money. So this way, when you go to the bank, you'll be able to have an independent party be like, yep, they made exactly that. These are my 2-year financial statements. This is what they made, versus you having put that together yourself. That provides more credibility in that banking conversation.
I told you I was way over my skis. So thank you, Chris, for bailing me out on that one.
Man, Les is about to say he agrees vehemently because reviewed financial statements hold more accountability. Let me tell you something from an entrepreneur's perspective. Reviewed financial statements cost extra $20,000 a year.
That's
right?
fair. That's fair.
So you got to think from an entrepreneur's perspective. Know how to count your money. Don't get it if you're in business and you don't know how to count. Let's go backwards and learn how to count. Like yo, here. Let me get personal with y'all for a second. I'm fighting with Les about it myself right now. If that makes sense, right? And I'm 15 years.
Let's make it personal. Let's make it personal.
Yeah, so I'm fighting with Les today about it, right? Because the idea is all those dollars matter to my bottom line. Yes, my business is big enough to support it, but I'm gonna fight with him long enough until I can keep holding that money in, because that money is bonus money for some of my people, or community money for something that we want to get out for the right people. So those dollars matter, but the books matter too. But remember, the entrepreneur journey is about balance, right? And it's about bootstrapping. It's about the hustle.
Hey, James, I agree with you. There is 3 different stages. We only talked about 2, right? So you got the bookkeeper, you got the accountant, and the next stage, which is the most expensive stage, is the CPA. So just, rolling it out.
I thought you was going to say something about audited financials. We was going to have a whole, we was going to start, Eli start laughing. You already know what I'm talking about. This dude, you want to talk about audited financials. They are crazy, man. Then you go acting like Bank of America again, man.
Qualified opinions and all that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You want that
Gotta
thing
keep it-
unqualified, not qualified.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now, I
What
mean,
else?
on that.
Go
Oh,
ahead,
what
Dave.
you about to say, Jay?
No,
Oh, no, I
go
was
ahead.
about
I
to
was
say-
gonna push it to you.
Yeah, okay, cool. We got 7 minutes left. These Starlings has a question from a while back that I just saw that's asking, says, I can unmute them if they want to say something. But it talks about, it doesn't like they're on anymore. But the question said, when we talk more about favorable lending for business loans, does that mean interest rates are generally lower? And what are the typical terms associated with kind of some of these new initiatives to improve lending for minority businesses?
So a couple of things I'll talk about, and I only can speak for Bank of America, right? I can't speak for all the other banks, but I think the other banks are doing something similar. And what we're talking about, yes, more favorable interest rates, potentially longer terms, and somewhat looser structure. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to stretch a little bit in order to help these business owners out. Again, it's case by case basis, depending on the situation.
So I guess as a follow-up question for that, to break it down a little bit more, with those three things that you just outlined, what are the advantages of those things to those small business owners?
So think about it, if you're stretching out the terms, right? Let's say, for example, you're trying to think of something. Let's say you're buying a piece of real estate, right? Right now, typically we do like a 5-year balloon on a 15-year amortization, or maybe a 20-year amortization. So that means your payments is amortized over that 15-year window, but you have a balloon in 5 years or 3 years. So that means it comes due at that maturity date. What we're trying to be.
And what I'm trying to do is fight him on that. Go ahead.
You always personalizing this, man. You always personalizing this.
Yes.
So what we're trying.
Go ahead.
So what we're trying to do now is say, okay, let's give the owner a little bit more flexibility. Let's see if we can stretch that maturity date out to 7 years, to maybe even 10 years. So let's talk about what's the benefit there. Obviously, you don't have to come back to the bank for, if it's 7 to 10 years versus the 3 to 5. So that's a big thing. The second part, and it goes back to my earlier conversation, right? If you have a maturity in 5 years, your interest rate, if it's fixed, it comes up and is revisited at that point in time. If we can stretch it out to 7 or 10 years, you have a longer window with that fixed interest rate.
Well, let's talk about stretching that AM 25 years though. That 20-year AM get tight. Amortization is the time, is how they divide the payments. The longer the AM, the smaller the payment. So I'm a brother who's always screaming, can I get a 25?
You'll get a 25-year amortization, but you also should be focused on that maturity window too, because I can give you a 50. No, that's not true. I can give you a 25.
Go ahead, say it. No, we record this too. You could give us a what? You can say, go ahead, say it. Go ahead and say it.
So listen, I can give you a 25-year amortization and a 3-year balloon. That's good. The payments are going to be the smallest. The issue there is you're going to have a maturity in 3 years, and then you're going to be back revisiting that loan again. So you got to think through the pros and cons on the longer amortization or the longer maturity date.
And for everybody who wants to know what I aim for, I usually aim for 7 and a 25, and I fight. Most of the time, you're not going to get a 25, but you can go through the SBA, and SBA offers a 25, and the SBA also offers low money down, but the process is a pain in the ass. But the terms, the upfront costs are expensive, but they roll the upfront terms into the backside of the loan, so you don't pay them up front. That you pay it across the loan, but the terms of the loan are most favorable. In our positions as small businesses, especially Mo, looping back to the conversation we talked about, the SBA right now, in your situation, if you don't have an SBA representative or somebody who you're working with, you should be getting in touch with. Please fill out the survey, because a business, there's tons of SBA money specifically out there for your situation right now. And you should probably, if you don't have access to it, jump in the survey and allow somebody to help you get there.
So let me just add on to that, because what James is talking about is mainly on equipment or real estate. So if you're buying a piece of real estate, you can go to the SBA and typically get an SBA 504. And what they will do is they'll give you a long-term note, typically 20 to 25 years, and a straight payment, straight maturity note, okay? And he'll close, you got to put down 10% equity in the deal and 90% financing, of which that 90% is 50% SBA, 40% the bank, and 10% equity of the individual. So you got that long note with the SBA, and then you'll have something similar with the bank. But again, it's out there. The SBA rate is very attractive. It's a very attractive rate. It's a good deal. You can do that with real estate, and you can do it with equipment. There's also a 7(a) program that some people use for permanent working capital, asset purchases, inventory purchases. That's 3 to 5 years, and they can stretch it up to 10 years. And the maturity date on the 7(a) could be as 5 to 7, or maybe even 10 years, depending on the asset purchase. So those are good programs. 7(a)s pricing might be a little bit higher. SBA 504, very aggressive rates and very attractive.
So everybody, we 1 minute to 8:30. I hate this moment because I feel like I want to make sure we got all the questions in, and if anybody got to jump off on the panel and there's any questions we missed, I'm happy to stay on to make sure we get the question. We make sure we get the question and answered. Dave, do we got any big outstanding ones that won't be answered in another part of the series, or anything? Anybody on a call who came in and there's something that we mentioned? Please, I don't want anybody to get off the call and feel like we left a stone unturned. So please jump off mute and feel free to hold me. I've reserved a little more time because I want to make sure we get everybody what they need.
Hey, James, while we're waiting, can I make one comment? Because we talked about financing your business at the beginning with personal credit cards. It goes back to that whole working capital cycle, because you got to be really careful. You don't want to have your credit cards maxed out for long period of times, because that overall impacts your credit score, which will then eventually impact you getting additional financing down the road. So you got to balance all that out. And to your point, I think you really need to make sure you understand that cycle time.
And I'll go back to the business Amex and business credit cards, because the business hustle is the business is going to guarantee the credit card and it doesn't show up on your personal credit. But if you blowed out, if you don't turn those cycles, or if you get stuck, then you're going to kill your credit, if that makes sense. But the key goes back to what we said earlier. Eli went into depth about it. Know your business, know your product, understand your mix, know what your drivers are, know what keeps you in business, and know, add up all your expenses, divide it by your margin. That number you get at the end is what it's going to cost you to break even to stay in business. If you don't hit that number a couple months in a row, you're going to be in trouble.
And I would tell you to break it down to a weekly basis too.
Let me see. Is a business plan a dinosaur? That's a damn good question. I'm gonna let one of y'all answer it. I got a point of view on that. Chris, Ida, Mark, Les.
I'll jump in. I don't think it is. I don't think it is if you plan to go about raising money and things like that, where people are going to want to see a structured process. Now, the old archaic models of a business plan, I think, are dinosaurs. I would really say really have a very comprehensive pitch deck or plan, because even no matter who you are, right? Even the old school OGs who didn't do business plans, they were structured and you're thinking about what their business is, how they're going to drive differentiator, et cetera, et cetera. So for a lot of people, especially, look, we all have, I'll tell you something, I'm a procrastinator. So for sometimes it's good for me to write out things and map them out because it helps structure my thoughts. But I would say, whatever you want to call it, a very structured way of how you're thinking about your business, the plan about what you're going to sell, what it's going to cost you, all the things James talked down to, right down to, is it going to be online or digital? However you're going to do it, I think it's important to have it now. I would say look for a version of it that's versatile and adapted to the needs of your business. But I think there is some value to having a plan, particularly when you're going to be going into places and speaking to people about either capital or partnerships or things like that. You take a lot of the subjectivity of you don't know what you're talking about, or you haven't thought about it off the table when you have something. And so what form that takes, I guess, is up for you to determine, but I'll stop there.
And I'll agree with that.
I'll jump in on that. And I would say parts of the business plan are a dinosaur. And I would say any business plan would focus back to what Eli was saying on what drives your business, and probably less about maybe the environment that you're in and how you're going to best serve the community and things of that nature, and focusing more on what the business is all about and how you plan to achieve the numbers that you're putting on the paper, and how you plan to hit those goals. Because ultimately that plan is going to tell the reader, whomever you're seeking funds from, on how they're going to get repaid and how believable that is. So I would focus a lot of energy on the numbers, at least from if I were the reader, I want to see where those numbers are they believable, and how does that compare to maybe your competitors in the industry per se. So if you're talking about numbers that are going to drastically exceed the industry, well, help me understand how you're going to get there. What about your business model is different than what the industry is doing? And if that is your driver, maybe your business disruptor, and if that's the case, I would really, really hone in on that part so the reader would understand how you're going to make a difference and disrupt what it is you're trying to achieve.
What I would say is I'm a doer. And I think somebody said divide about a week. So I'm an action guy, so I like to see action. But the rest of the world wants to understand how you inform those actions. So I think what everybody's saying is true. There has to be a modified version of a business plan, and in today's environment, that's just called a deck, right? So you gotta be doing, you gotta have a deck, and you gotta know how to pitch the shit out of it. If you can't pitch what you're doing, if your elevator ain't on point and makes somebody want to keep hearing, then keep doing until you can define your deck and define your elevator, right? And then that gets you there, right? Because there's tons of people out there talking about their idea and their valuation, their idea. I got this great idea and I'm raising money for it. Every time somebody starts a conversation with that and they can't show me another business that they made a lot of money on, man, I give them that face like, oh, yeah. Oh, that's dope. When you get that, oh, yeah, you get that 3 times, nobody's really listening, right? So you got to make sure that if you're going about raising it, make sure you've done it already, right? Because there's enough people out here who's raising money based on evaluation they grabbed out the clouds, just trying to figure it out. And we talked about the percentage rate of failure if you don't got a plan and capital to fund the idea.
Hey,
I'll add
James,
one more thing to that. When you think of James's business, right? James talked about the deck, the pitch. I always tell people, really pressure test it as you're writing it to think about the problem you're trying to solve. Everybody's in business trying to solve a problem. I'll give you an example. You might not think James's business is solving a problem. The problem is a consumer need. You go to social status, you get an experience. You get the kid going for fresh gear, fresh kicks, from the everyday staples to the high end in an environment that makes them feel aspirational and things. It comes from social status. He has a value proposition in the business he's created that's very different from going to Dr. J's or whatever. I'm talking New York Talk, whatever is on a boulevard or street somewhere, but he is serving a consumer need, and his business's value proposition is very clear and he can articulate it, and he delivers it in the product he serves in social status, Amamanier, all the brands. But if he hadn't thought about where he was going and what he's trying to serve, he would just be putting a store out there that just sells shoes and t-shirts.
And there's going to be a whole session on pitching, just so everybody knows. That's one of the 5 sessions, that just so y'all know, to be tapped in on if you look at the survey. So
pitching,
definitely want to keep that in mind for the future.
Building and pitching. That session on building and pitching is so important. And I've had to pitch to some of the people, most of the panel, if that makes sense. I even pitch back to our own team, and they don't realize that I'm pitching to them, because if our team doesn't get it, that means I need to go back to the drawing board as a leader, right? And before I start going outward what we're talking about, if that makes sense.
Hey, James, I was going to say something, but I know your bodyguard had something he wanted to say.
Go ahead, Rico.
No, I was just going to follow up on Eli's point. So I would say a couple of things. One, and Dave mentioned this, there is a session on pitching your ideas, but also 2, I think you never assume that the people in the room understand what you're trying to accomplish. So that's your opportunity to pitch your one pager or your deck or whatever you choose to call it. So, and I always, I'm old school. My kids will laugh that if I stayed, they could hear me say this: do your homework, right? It might sound corny, but do your homework. Be as prepared as you can possibly be, and educate the other individuals in the room as to why you're doing what you're doing and why you believe in your ability to be successful.
And anybody who don't understand Rigo's impact and me working with him for 15 years, listen to the conversation I had with Bima. Anybody that jumped off the call and missed that part, to do your homework part, he said to me, don't assume everybody in the room knows what I'm talking about. He said that to me 13 years ago, and it like lights went off in my mind, because the assumption that I made is that everyone knew what I knew and what I was thinking and how I was thinking it. And it was the biggest mistake that I was making at the time.
And James, I would say, if you're doing the business plan just for somebody else, you're missing half of the equation. The business plan should be about you, right? Something you can go back and tweak over a couple of months, over a year, and see what changes you need to do. And if you're on plan with what you initially started from. So I think it's a good tool. And it's not only a good tool to share with others, but also something to go back and look at and see where you are.
So what I'm gonna do now is be fair, because we just had an added 10-minute conversation and bonus, and that was the question we got. And there's a couple other questions that were directed towards me.
I was about to say there's one that I think we definitely should do, because we didn't touch on it all, and it's right in the finance. I want to go to Tyler real quick. I'm sorry if our panelists, if you could hang on for this one. I think this is a really good one that a lot of entrepreneurs don't really talk about. But Tyler Shaw just tossed in a question about planning for your retirement as an entrepreneur. So I think we should definitely, if we can spend like 5 minutes on that before we close, Jay.
Oh, let's go for it. Is he jumping on, or you just want us to talk about it?
I'm asking him to unmute now. There he is.
Yeah, my answer to this one. Go ahead. Go. What's good with you, Tyler?
What's going on? How you feeling?
Oh man, blessed.
Yeah. No, I just had a question. Like, a lot of times we go from the day to day and kind of don't plan for the future. So I was just trying to see if you had any strategies that you put in place to set yourself up for the future.
So for me specifically, when I got into retail, I had three things in mind, right? If you heard my story, the first was I'm trying to live and be free, was the first one, right? The second one was I needed to be able to take care of myself while I struggled, right? Because going into the statistics are real, right? I seen a number that said 75% of people fail. I was like, all right, so this is going to be a little tougher than what I may think. So I had some residual income coming in through rental properties that covered my bills and I knew could cover my lifestyle. So the first thing I did was quantify my life and put a number on it and said, my life cost this. And I had this amount of rental income, and I got a little delta in there to cover me, right? And at the time I had no kids. The rest of it was just prayer, bro. Because in the beginning, what you're trying to do is make it. Now, as the business starts to evolve, right? Then obviously I started adding, once I had kids, I added 529, right? I've always, it took me years to grasp the idea of pay yourself first. And I could go back and forth with some of the panelists, but for me, going back to Giovanni's earlier point, if it was with team playing myself and getting some more inventory, man, fuck that, I need to get some more inventory. I could pay myself later, right? This business got to keep going. I got to put every dime in. It's right. So it's tough when you know you got some money scrounged away, but you also know you invested in the opportunity. So you got to keep moving forward. And I say that at the same time, before me and Rigo go back, I don't want to give a lot of the story because it'll take up so much time. But I remember I was at a crossroads with Rigo where I didn't think that retail was worth it anymore because of what you're saying now. I wasn't able to do enough. I was making enough money, but I'm such a passionate entrepreneur. Everything that I was making, I was throwing it back into the business. And I knew once I crossed 30 that I needed to start being a little bit more responsible with my choices. And that's what the conversation that was Rigo was unlocking for me. And we were having at the time in the showroom, one-on-one was around me asking him what he said, like me trying to get to understand why people didn't understand my idea or how to bring it to life. Until you have something that makes money, it's impossible to save money as an entrepreneur, because unless you're capitalized and you're able to use other people's money in the beginning, the reality of it is, bro, ain't no such thing as saving in the beginning. Not in my world, because I came with nothing. Nobody I knew had nothing, or they was on a corner. So if I went and got they something that came with a price I didn't really want to have nothing to do with no more, right? So for me, it was about putting it all in until I could see results, or choosing another career path where I could begin to start making some of those choices around saving. Does that make sense? And that's honesty. I could give you all the stuff that I'm doing now, but thank God I'm in position now to be making money. So all of that stuff don't apply to when you're starting a business. Does that make sense?
Can I add one thing on that real quick too? That when you do get to the point that you can, it still might be a little bit on shaky ground. And think about what you're putting it into. And if you ever needed to go back to get it, what are the restrictions associated with that from a tax perspective and some of those other things? Take that into consideration as well, in terms of making sure that if you do need to go back and draw on that for whatever reason to keep things going, that you're not paying penalties and fees and things like that. Something to think about.
I'm gonna finish.
That's when you need an accountant.
Yes.
A CPA.
And I'm gonna finish this. I'm gonna finish this with a J quote. There ain't no retirement plan for hustlers unless you win. So win, right? Like invest the time. You're here, invest in the time to win. Take the time to really figure out as an entrepreneur what it takes to win. Do the work. Eli said it earlier. Chris said it earlier. Rigo just added gems into it. Brad said things around it. The information's out here. Just like all of you guys were mindful enough, guys and women, men and women were mindful enough to join us tonight. Jump on Google, be curious, dig in, grab the information. There's more information available at our fingertips than there's ever been available. Use the information and leverage the tools out there to help yourself get better, and understand that we're going to be here as a platform to support you also, but you have to do the work.
I think that's a perfect place to end on. Perfect place to end on. If you guys haven't gotten a chance, go ahead and grab that link. Give you a few seconds here to grab that link for the survey in the chat so you can get added to the email list, as well as ask any specific questions and help guide where we're going to go next between this free game collaboration with the Black Community Business Advisory. Yeah, throw some love in the chat if you got something from tonight, guys. I really appreciate y'all coming out. We had about almost 100 people in here, at our peak. So thank you guys. We got about 63 in here right now. Thank you guys for sticking around. We really appreciate it. Any of our panelists want to close out with any closing thoughts before we end tonight?
No, come on, let's go.
Make sure you guys copy and paste the survey. If there's something specific you need help with from someone on the panel, please get the survey and dig into the survey. And if you got any questions for me, if you know me personally, hit my cell. If you don't know me, hit my DM. If I haven't responded to the DM, hit me again on Sunday nights. And at nights, I try to get there to the unread. So please continue to hit me and I'll get back to you. I promise.
Hey, Dave, just a quick thank you to you and James for providing this platform. Much appreciated. And thank you for the opportunity to share.
Sure thing.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Big shout.
Thank you, everybody. This is just the beginning. We'll catch you at the next 5 sessions.